Hi folks, it's Mouse here. This is a follow-on video to the other video I made about the Ford tractor seat, which was to be repaired but was found to be pretty well knackered, so we decided to get an aftermarket seat, and this is it. It's not a bad seat. It comes on a sliding base, which I've already cut off because we don't want the sliding base. The tractor already has a sliding base, and on top of that it has a pantograph type spring affair, and if we were to put this on top of that, the tractor seat would be up so high, not even I with my long legs would be able to reach the pedals. Now this is an easily dismantleable seat, and I've loosened the bolts, so back comes off, wiggly wiggly, seat comes off, and this was attached onto this sliding mechanism, but as I said, I've cut it off because we don't need it. So that'll go in the to be used for another project box. This is the original Ford seat mounting. Seat was attached to this. This was attached on this axle, so the seat could be rocked forward or just sitting down for normal use. So all I have to do basically is attach this onto here, which is a fairly straightforward welding job. A couple of welds there, a couple of welds here, possibly drill some holes and weld through the holes here because I don't have an electric clamp spot welder. And that will attach it to the standard Ford base. Very simple, very easy, not going to bore you with that. I'll show you the end result once I've done the welding. This base is an issue though. The problem is that this pantograph type mechanism that allows for the spring in the seat has two arms that do this, spring shock absorber across the bottom. One end is fixed onto here, and one end then, obviously as this goes up and down, one end has to slide on the pantograph. And it does. It in fact slides here, up in there like that, while this end is fixed. Now, this is going to be very hard to see, but right down in this far corner here, you may notice that there's a groove worn in the metal, and there's the same on this side. And that's because the sliding bit is supported on two metal rollers. And these metal rollers are now far from what you would call round. They are in fact what you would call buggered, and this is a result of the previous owner, whose philosophy was that the best sort of maintenance for a tractor is to leave it out in the weather and not put any grease on it ever. So I think the last time this saw grease was in the factory. So what I'm going to do is fill those little grooves up, and then I'm going to put in here a piece of about 1 mil thick 20 gauge steel, and I will let the rollers run on that steel. Now I'm not going to use rollers. These rollers are in fact 10 mil ID, 19 mil OD. So I can use a 6800 single row ball bearing, which is 10 mil ID, 18 mil OD. It will fit in here. There's about just over 20 millimetres, so 1 millimetre plate, still leaves clearance, and I will actually run it on ball bearings. I want to fill those little groovy hole things in there, because otherwise the pressure will eventually distort the plate. And I could do that with weld, but I'm going to cheat a little bit. No such thing as cheating, in fact, because the plate itself is going to be held in by the pressure of the rollers, and because there's no room for it to move axially, all I need to do basically is glue it in place. So what I'll do is I'll use Tobin bronze, and I'll run brazing material into those two just to fill them up. So the bronze will work well because it'll give me a reasonably flush surface. I can slip the 1 millimetre plate in there. I'll have a couple of holes drilled through it. I'll braze through them. It'll be nice and solid, and it will then act as a good support for the cantilever bearings. Cantilever? No. For the pantograph bearings. The other thing that needs to be done to this is we're going to put a seatbelt onto the tractor, and these here are the standard seatbelt mounting points. And these ears are, for my liking, a little bit flimsy for mounting a seatbelt on. So my intention is to get some 16 gauge steel perhaps and weld it in on top of that around here to reinforce this. Further, this joint here and the corresponding joint here, these ones are not welded, so I'll weld them as well, just to reinforce the whole structure, so that if there is a tip and this inverts, the seatbelt's got a reasonably solid grounding and won't allow the driver to fall out. There is one other problem that I need to address. I've only seen this on the tractor once and didn't really pay a lot of attention, and that is that the pantograph mechanism, I have to make sure that when it slides, it's not capable of sliding all the way here. Otherwise, if it does flip the tractor, this of course will want to drop, the pantograph will let it drop, and then these bearings will slip out from here and the whole seat will be able to fall, and that won't do the driver any good at all. So when I install this, I'm going to need to make sure that those rollers cannot come, those bearings cannot come back further than about here, and if on doing that I notice that they can, we'll have to arrange some sort of a bolt or some sort of a stopper to go in here to prevent that from happening, so that when it inverts under gravity, these rollers will not pull out like that. They'll be stuck in under there and the driver will be quite safe. Okay, so I'm going to go away and do some welding, and once I've got it all welded and painted and all that sort of thing, I'll show it to you. You can have a squizzy at it, and then I'll wander off down to the property and set up the camera and do a short vid of installing it on the tractor and seeing what it looks like when all is finished. Okay, so I'll time travel to the next section. Cheers. Okay, so in the last fade through, a couple of things happened. We had to go down, Gary and I had to go down to his property on another job. So while we were down there, we took a look at the tractor and answered the questions that needed answering. And two, I finished preparing the seat mounting as a result of that. We discovered that the pantographic spring-loaded seat mounting thingy is pretty well designed, and in fact if it tips upside down, the seat mounting here won't drop off. It'll stay firmly attached, so that's good. The second thing we discovered was I was originally going to mount this section, which is the hinge plate that goes on here, up around here somewhere, but that would have put the seat in an unusable position. So we had to move it forward, and in order to access the bolts here, we had to relieve a little bit out of it. Now that's not a problem. There's only a small amount of contact here where I could run the TIG around it, but that's not a problem, because in fact there's no load on this pin. It only is comes into play when the seat hinges forward. The rest of the time this piece sits flush on the seat mounting. Now I welded up these parts of the seat mounting. I added some extra metal in to these ears to make them tougher, and I put in this wear plate as I said I was going to, so that bit's complete. The only thing is that in order for it to fit in here, and this, oh, I bet that's nice and noisy, in there, I had to rebate some metal out of here to clear this, so that this piece here will sit flush on this piece here, and that's why there's no load on this. So that sits in there like that, and that sits on there. That will then be mounted onto the tractor. The squab, of course, will be on there, and the back will be on here. Now, one thing we did notice was that for Gary, whose tractor it is and who's going to be riding it, the back of the seat here leans too far back and is also physically too far back from the squab, so when he's driving he has to sort of drive like this. So I've made up some spaces just out of some 1-inch square tubing which can go in between the squab, the back of the seat and the bracket, and possibly 2 at the top if needs be, and 1 at the bottom, and that should pull this closer to the front and straighten it up a bit. So that should give him much better support in the small of his back, or the top of the small of his back. And so that's it. It's ready to be installed now, so we'll do another fade away into the wilderness, and next time I'm back should be on the tractor installing this, and then that will finally be the end of the video. There is one thing I should note: cutting this relief in here may in fact weaken this a little bit, and with a constant banging against here, as you know, riding a tractor is never a smooth ride, it may end up causing some sort of distortion here. It's not a big job to whip this off. Make a bit of an extra plate that we can put in here and weld it in and repaint it. So there you go. Seat mounting all welded, done, ready to go, and I'll report back to you from the tractor. Okay folks, this is an uninterrupted view of the seat mounting, very carefully removed and cleaned and painted by Gary, who's now reinstalling it, and is just about to tighten up the bolts and grease everything up. Okay, now we've got the seat mounting in place, we've got the roller bearings in place. We now have to mount the 2 seat mountings. Gary's just giving it a swim in WD-40. So that's the first mounting. This is the second one. Okay, sits back down there, this bolts up, and then we can mount the seat. So we'll come back to you when this bolt's been tightened up and the seat's mounted on. Okay, so this is the seat finished, and as you can see, it tips forward, does all the things it's supposed to do. Gary is now going to get into it and demonstrate how comfortable it is on the bum and its superiority over the Ferguson type. There you go, happy as Larry. So we've got a couple of other small jobs to do on this tractor, and then it's going in the shed. Okay, whoopie-doo, that's it. Thanks folks.